Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. There will be no agenda adjustments today. The meeting is being videotaped, and because we have remote participation, Dan, Bob, George, and Mark, all of our votes will be done by roll call. Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the February 7th, 2023 minutes. Motion by
Second
Sid.
Whitman.
Second
Second
by-
Whitman.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call for a roll call vote. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
George Coney?
Yes.
Jim Coughlin?
Yes.
Jim Hyden?
Yes.
Bob Mahoney?
Yes.
Jack Manning?
Yes.
Bob Mello?
Yes.
Bob Mola? Dan Salvucci?
Yes.
Motion carries. At this point in the agenda, I'll introduce Linda.
And actually, Jen.
Oh,
showed
yeah.
us- showed us the right
You
one.
explained it nice.
Figured I'd try. I'm so sorry. Did not account for
Back-
traffic today.
Linda just tagged off.
I
And-
did.
And
I'm out.
I'll introduce Jen Carlson from Leftfield, who will address the next several items on the agenda.
Yes, so they were contract with us.
Yes.
Perfect. That was perfect timing. All right, so you all have meeting packets in front of you. And we are, the next item on the agenda is the left field contract amendment number 1. We had talked about this at the last meeting, and this was part of the reason that we had voted to extend the feasibility study agreement funds. So we have a contract amendment in the amount of $220,000, which will extend our left field contract to $400,000 even. So we are looking for a vote to approve that, or if you have any questions on it.
Does anyone have any questions for Jen?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the amended increase of $220,000.
Second? Second by Bob Mahoney. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, again, we'll do a roll call by committee members. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Jim Coughlin?
Yes.
Jim Hyden?
Yes.
Bob Mahoney?
Yes.
Jack Manning?
Yes.
Bob Mello?
Yes.
Bob Mola? Dan Salvucci?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 2 left field invoices. If you go to your packet, you can see right in front of that page that shows the invoice summary. That shows the amended payment schedule for our contract. As you can see here, these two, the first invoice is for services through April 30th. The second is for services during the month of May. And you can see that ties back to that page just before those two $12,000 amounts in our laid out fee schedule. So we are looking for approval of left field invoices totaling $24,000.
Any questions for Jen again? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve? Motion. Bob Mahoney, second by Situate?
Yep.
All right, I'll call the roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
George Coney?
Yes.
Jim Coughlin?
Yes.
Jim Harding?
Yes.
Bob Mahoney?
Yes.
Jack Manning?
Yes.
Bob Mello?
Yes.
Bob Mola? Dan Salvucci?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next slide, we are providing an update on the designer selection process. So as of April 25th was the first DSP meeting. As you know, there were 3 local DSP members that were involved in this process at the, and they participated in the larger MSBA designer selection panel, is what DSP stands for. They participated in those meetings. The full DSP panel voted to invite 3 firms to provide interviews on the follow-up meeting, which was May 9th. And those 3 firms are listed here: Romeo Rosane Anderson, Kessel Booz, and LaValle Brensinger. At the May 9th meeting, after 3 interviews, the clear winners were Romeo Rosane Anderson, who worked with me here today. They provided a fantastic interview, and obviously they know you guys already as well, so that was certainly helpful, and we're so excited to have them on board. So from there, we also negotiate the contract, but I believe the agenda has me introducing you first. So if you would like to
Sure.
take the reins.
First of all, you can call us DRA, it's a lot easier. Officially, we're Romeo Rosane Anderson. I'm Carl Franceschi, principal with DRA. With me, Judd Christopher, our project manager, and on the line is Sarah Carda, our project architect. And thanks for switching the time to be a little more accommodating for us. We appreciate that. And I know you had to adjust your schedules too. What we thought we'd do by way of introduction is kind of speed through the interview that we gave to the designer selection panel. I know it'll be kind of old news to a couple of you, but is there a way, Crystal, that I can click through from over here? It could go faster that way, I think, if that's possible. Thank you. It doesn't work this way. Oh, great. Here we are. So, you know the format of the design selection panel, there's the 3 from the local district, and then there's, I think 10 or 12 other members who are permanent members. So we take time to introduce ourselves to them. These are some of the folks who spoke at the interview, including our team there across the top, the key members of our team. By the time we're well into this, we'll have several more players too. And some of the key consultants. One of the first ones to be active in the project, David Stephen there on the lower left, is educational planner. And as we'll talk about, one of the first steps is educational visioning. The agenda that we went through, the panel asked us some questions to respond to make sure that we touched on. So we wanted to make sure we did that, but we also highlighted that box out of the way. Oh, there we go. Cover up my face. Woven into our presentation were some themes that we thought were appropriate in all aspects of these, including DRA's obvious career tech experience. We've done a lot of projects. I think it's fair to say more than any other architecture firm in New England, frankly. And several other important themes that apply to all aspects of our work. So we wanted to familiarize the panel with our previous work here, especially obviously the first task there, the facilities master plan from about 5 years ago that introduced us to South Shore, but several others sort of follow-on projects there, kind of listed across the top under that black banner, but in various ways, just to share with the panel, like I say, our familiarity with the building. One of their questions was about how are we going to engage the community? And, in a regional school district, that's a little bit different than for a school, for a single community. So we talked about the need to be able to do what we're doing right now, have meetings that might be hybrid, Some meetings might be in person, some meetings might be totally virtual. That's something we'll want to discuss too going forward here, but we've worked in several other regions where when we had in-person meetings, we would actually do kind of multiple presentations of the same information, just in different locations to make it more convenient so people didn't have to drive, you know, a half hour to come to a central location. We'd go to them. It was one important project. But one of the other things that we talk about is some of the things you've already done, assembling the right building committee that has a good, you know, representation of all the communities in the region, starting early, which you've already done, obviously. And we'll work with Left Field and all about being transparent and setting up a web page that has kind of a repository of all the documentation so that people can find out what's going on at any time. We always want to be able to say, you know, and answer to questions, you know, that information's on the website. Hopefully they can, you know, find things that they're looking for and they don't feel like they've been left in the dark through this whole process. Number 4 too is important about communicating the need for the project. Before we start talking about solutions and, you know, even options, we want to make sure people understand why, you know, what's the need for this project, whether it's an addition renovation or a new school or what it might be. We want people to understand that there's a need to do something here. And then our presentations too, we don't just want to dispense information, we want to get input. There's a lot of people here, yourselves obviously first among them, but who know this building and this region, this school district better than we do. We want to hear what they have to say. And as we share with them what, you know, we've learned and you know, as we start to focus in on what some of the issues are, we want to hear, you know, meaningful input from them. What's important, what are the priorities in the district. So this is all during the design process. We're not talking about community engagement at the end of schematic design when we're going for a vote among all the communities. That's a whole different kind of almost public relations campaign where we are dispensing information and making ourselves available to answer questions. And we'll certainly participate in that as well. So yeah, there's what we're talking about, you know, some of the key aspects of this, having multiple formats for these sessions. We have done them online. There's a sample of a Zoom meeting. And particularly in a regional district, there are people, you know, who might send a handful of students to South Shore. They don't really, the community doesn't really get as involved and may not even know that there's a project going on. We just want to make sure that it's publicized and available to them so that, like we say, when it comes time to vote, it's not something. This part of the presentation was done by our educational planner talking about visioning. That's that word up there in the upper left corner. The MSBA process is a pretty well thought out process, and it requires that we think about educational planning and visioning first before putting, you know, pencil and paper and sketching ideas about what the solution should be. They want to make sure that South Shore thinks about how does teaching and learning want to happen here. You know, we want to confirm what Chapter 74 programs you want to have, what some of the future trends are, where the district might be going, all those sorts of things. And to do that, as I say, that process is starting now. We sort of had a kickoff phone call the other day and identified some dates as early as June 20th. What was the first one? Yeah, June 20th will be the first one. So it's an invited group of participants, a lot of teachers, a lot of educators, obviously, hopefully a few students can join us, and administrators, and we'll be there as well and participating. But and David Stephen, who is both an architect, by the way, and an educational planner, will facilitate. There'll be 3 of these sessions. They're each about 2 hours long, but they're pretty well thought out and efficient use of time in general. And hopefully at the end of it, it kind of gets at some of those topics there. What are the guiding principles that, you know, we want to keep in mind no matter what the future solution is? as I say, we haven't designed anything yet, so it's good to kind of be flexible in the way we think about education happening here. And the sessions will be virtual. They will be via Zoom, which, you know, turns out is more convenient for folks, and especially as we get into the summer, because some of the sessions are going to be into July. It'll be more convenient, hopefully, for people to participate, because we do want the same basic group of people to try to participate in 3 sessions. And there's a good sharing of information. David will present some trends, ask questions. There's a device, you can see it there. There's a piece of software, maybe you've come across it in other forms, but online you can do polling instantly. So he can ask questions, people can log on and answer the questions, and the results show up immediately for the group to see, which is great. Way to do that. As we get to some of the later sessions, we'll be doing more hands-on kind of activities where the group will break into smaller groups. And then we'll actually start putting pencil to paper, you might say, but not architectural diagrams. They're more kind of just adjacencies. How might the school be organized, sort of diagrammatically? And ultimately, this all feeds into the school's education plan. And even though we have an educational planner and we have experience, the MSBA asked that plan actually sort of be initiated and generated by the school themselves. We obviously will help in reviewing it, editing it, and so forth. So these are some of the things that David emphasizes in thinking about putting that plan together and creating these guiding principles as what could this project do for South Shore. And some of the current trends in career tech, vocational. We're working with several other vocational districts, and some of the things we're seeing there and that David's seeing is, you know, there's more attempts to make connections between the academic side of the student's curriculum and the career tech side of the curriculum. You get both the teachers and the students collaborating on content and so forth. And that can sometimes be translated into physical adjacencies, not just, you know, programmatic kind of connections.
I know I'm
Hands-on kind of learning that these students are, you know, most adept at can also be, you know, not just in shop, but in math class or social studies, try to do project-based learning using the same kind of skills. And he touched on, you know, some of the career pathways that, like we said, we might want to confirm. This is, you know, an important moment in time. What Chapter 74 programs does South Shore want to continue with? And also, it helps us think about future flexibility too. A lot of these programs, if you just look back yourselves at 10 years ago, what your curriculum was and what it is now, there's probably been a few changes. And so we want to think about how to best accommodate those and build in some flexibility. And then we demonstrated, this is sort of I know it's a hard chart to read maybe from where you are, but DRA's experience with all of these different Chapter 74 programs here. We listed the ones that South Shore has are kind of highlighted in each of these career cluster areas. And then these are all DRA projects across the top, showing our experience with different programs. So we do have a lot of experience with different shops and all the equipment and layout and issues related to that, so that we can help interact with your instructors, your teachers, and when that time comes.
Sharing is paused. Sorry, just catch that.
Oh, where's
Just
that?
hit the green arrow up.
Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I think.
We still sharing?
Maybe it might not, did it share the presentation? Sorry. I just
Yeah,
noticed it.
you're still showing the entire screen.
Okay.
Oh,
Sorry about
I
that.
gotta go back to the. Okay, Then we just ran through some pretty pictures of other projects of ours to give some background to our experience in different shops. Machine shops and auto mechanics, auto tech, culinary, cosmetology. We talked about two issues about, the challenges of inviting the public into a facility, making it welcoming, but also making it secure. You have a little issue right now with the way this is kind of remote from where the admin people are. And we've talked about, can we get some adult presence here to sort of keep an eye on this entrance as well? We've developed a few ways to do that in some of these other projects. Graphic arts and engineering and computer kinds of courses, all the health-related shops, dental and medical and health assisting, engineering disciplines, and obviously all the building and construction trades too. And a lot of schools nowadays are organizing their shops in career clusters so that those shops are physically close together. They might relate to academic classrooms too in clusters, and it's a way to break down the scale of the building too into kind of identifiable areas. One of the things we certainly find, maybe you do too here, is that students, when you ask them, like, where do you go to school? They don't just say South Shore. They may say, I'm in the carpentry program at South Shore. They identify with their shop as much as identifying with the school. And some of the other background too that hopefully helps us through the MSBA process. But there's a couple forms that are required as we go through this. There's a couple forms that the MSBA requires us to use as we go through this feasibility study. One of them is on the right there, that space summary form. It lists every space in the building that you currently have, and then what spaces do you want going forward, so that they can account both the quantity of individual rooms and the total area of the building, because ultimately they do use it when they're figuring the grant amount, because they limit, how many dollars they'll spend per square foot on eligible spaces and all. But they have those forms for elementary schools, they have them for middle schools and academic high schools. They don't have the form for vocational high schools. And ever since we did the very first MSBA project, was the Putnam Vocational School in Springfield, we created the form that they now use and they give to other architects to use on vocational school projects, because we realized, they realized that in order to calculate the number of academic classrooms, vocational schools have a week on, week off, so at any time, only half the enrollment roughly is in academic classrooms. And so, we modified the form to do that. And then on the left there, for those who are familiar with Department of Education, Chapter 74 folks, Dave Edmonds comes around to all the shops regularly. I think he's got assistants now too, to review their layout, the safety procedures and so forth. They want that department to review these projects before they get built. Initially, they would come out after they were built. And that was a little bit late, because he'd start wanting to add, can you put another exit sign? Can you give me a fire extinguisher over here? Can you have an emergency shut off over here? We realized they don't read plans too well. So we started developing these really detailed layouts. This is an auto shop. And we highlight all the safety facilities on the plan, so that during the design phase, we could meet with him and get his sign off before it was built, obviously to save a lot of change orders down the line. And again, this form has been adopted by the MSBA, and other projects use it as well. And if we wanted to talk a little bit about flexibility, I mentioned that about how things change and how can we design for that. That was sort of a question too that the MSBA was asking us. It is a challenge with shops to think about, how could, what's now an auto body shop become, a computer tech space or something in the future. And it is a challenge in the high bay shops, as we kind of distinguish. There are two basic kinds of shops, but physically the ones that require high ceilings and are kind of noisy or dirty or more industrial in nature. They also tend to have more utility requirements. They need, vacuum or gas or, more electrical power, things like that, distributed in those shops. So one thing we'll talk about with you at some point is, do we kind of overinvest in those utilities in several of the shops, even if they don't need it today, just to save for future. And then certainly in the low base shops, we've developed a strategy too, to think about designing those. They're more like office environments almost, and designing it like a spec office building where you could take down the walls between the shops more easily, have a column-free kind of space, so that, what is, drafting 1 year, it could become, a graphic arts program more easily and be reconfigured the way offices get reconfigured. Not building out a concrete block, but building out a metal stud and drywall, things like that are possible. So we did talk about that. Then the designer selection panel is always interested in our kind of approach to a project. And we always have to caution everyone, even right now, that this is very preliminary. We want to show how we think about it, but we're really not showing solutions yet. So we don't want to jump to conclusion. But these are some of the aspects that, we think are important here in going forward. That career tech and academic integration that we talked about. Here's Cape Cod. I don't know if you've been there, but that's something we might want to think about too, is taking some field trips. Cape Cod Tech. This is the floor plan of it. It's now built. It's been open a couple of years now. But these purple spaces, those are the high bay shops. They literally are just across the hall from academic spaces. Somewhat like your original hallway here, although that wasn't necessarily the intent, but we kind of enhanced that by providing spaces like this. That's that circled space right there is this collaboration area. So both students who are in academic classes or students that are in shop, they have a space that they can come together in, and the teachers can come together as well. So those are, the academic classes there, and they organize, as we said, there's sort of career clusters of shops, and they have some teacher planning spaces, some special ed spaces, some small group areas, and they form what they call an academy. So that, again, those students identify kind of with that academy as much as with the overall school. And there are 4 of these in the building. It's a 2-story building in the back there. And so it's one way of doing career tech and academic integration. Here's another one. This is a 3-story building. This is out in Pittsfield, the Taconic High School. It was originally built as a comprehensive high school. About half the kids were career tech students, and about half were regular academic students. They subsequently have kind of reconfigured their school, and all the academic students now go to Pittsfield High School, and they've converted the entire building to be career tech. So it does have that flexibility built into it, but we've stacked the academic classrooms on top of the shops here. We managed to do it in a way that the noise, the vibration doesn't translate to the classrooms above. But it does allow them, when they first opened, they wanted to still have kind of a traditional high school where the English department was together and social studies was together. But we showed them how that same space could be reorganized. And you could have a freshman academy, but you could have what they call science and engineering academy and stacked on top of the shops. You could also organize it vertically too, so that that construction academy could kind of own the classrooms directly above it as another way of thinking. And then these yellow cylinders here kind of represent stairs and utility cores vertically, and they could expand the building across the driveway there, utilizing that layout relatively easily. And then we talked about safety and security with welcoming the public in. This is Northeast Metro Tech that's in design right now. Here's their customer entrance. It's a dedicated entrance, has a vestibule that's locked, immediately adjacent to the restaurant and cosmetology salon. And so those customers can be welcomed in, but they can't go any further into the building, and they're supervised directly by the placement of those features right there. And there are public accessible men's and women's rooms right off of that lobby again, and so forth. So that's one way to deal with, being welcoming and without allowing, the public to get too far into the building for those particular shops. Another issue these days is having more compact footprints. A lot of the sites that we have to deal with, including yours, don't have, very generous sites if we want to think about new construction. And so we have on several projects started stacking program spaces, including shops, on top of one another. And here you can see this is on a hillside, so the ground was sloping. So there is a lower level here, but it's totally out of the ground on one end. That's the auto body, automotive, metal fab are all down at that lower level. And we've actually stacked an auditorium and a gym and locker rooms on top of those shops as well, and still managed to get the ventilation and so forth in there, just to keep the footprint more compact, which is generally more economical too. And speaking of auditoriums, one of the things that we've developed, it kind of started at Cape Cod. A few years ago, the MSBA would say to vocational schools, no, you can't really have an auditorium. You guys don't have a drama program, you don't have a music program, you're not going to use an auditorium, and it's an expensive space to build. You wouldn't use it frequently enough to really justify it. They have come around now to be more accepting, and if in your educational plan you can justify the need for that kind of space, they will make it eligible for reimbursement. But what we found is maybe a better use to vocational schools is to have what you might call a flexible auditorium. They do make these kind of seats that collapse like bleachers do, but they're much more comfortable. They're upholstered, they're like auditorium seats, but they do retract so that you can have a full flat floor. And in a couple projects, that flat floor could be at grade. You put an overhead door and you could actually drive cars in. If you wanted to put cars on display, or if you wanted to have a career fair or some kind of conference space or robotics competition, science fair, you could use that flat floor, or some other kinds of spaces that, a large group room that may not be eligible elsewhere in the program for reimbursement, you can use that space for it. And it's a double height space. It can have a balcony around it on the upper floor that's, just a couple seats wide, something like that. We are integrating this kind of space. It kind of started at Cape Cod vocational on a smaller scale, but we've expanded it at Platt Tech. This is down in Connecticut. But Northeast Metro Tech is going to have a similar space, and Tri-County, which is just in schematic design that we're working on in Franklin, is also going to have a similar kind of space. They realize that it makes much more sense for them than a fixed auditorium kind of space. And then real world experience, that you all know about that. That's what we're trying to achieve in a lot of these shops, to give the students that real kind of experience. And so again, this is more for the designer selection panel than for you guys, but we have spaces like restaurants and cosmetology salons in these buildings that don't look like high school spaces. They have different quality of finishes. They're more what students would see out in the real world. So then we wanted to apply those ideas to South Shore on a very quick preliminary basis. So just analyzing the site, as you all know, there is a certain amount of area here, but not a lot of it is buildable with all the wetlands that are back there. And so to us, there, a couple very preliminary options to be studied would be, is there a way, even for your current enrollment, you probably need more space, I think, right? Before you even get into it, you understand that. Obviously, with taking on Marshfield and with thinking about expanding the enrollment, you need even more space. So we need to identify in an addition renovation option, where could we add? And so one thought is, and we want to do it in a way that you can continue to operate in the building, obviously, while construction is going on. And so if we could identify an area in front of the school where the contractor, the construction folks could enter directly from the street, but the school traffic might be on the sides and still be able to come and go. We might be able to safely segregate the construction activity from the ongoing day-to-day school. And what we've shown in this option, again, very preliminary, without talking to anyone here really seriously, is what if we demolish the front wing of the building there, utilize some modulars. This is just graphic. You need a lot more than this probably, but also utilize the building, the house you've just acquired too, obviously for some office space, but for some classroom space to allow that demolition to happen. Keep the gym and the cafeteria kind of as the connecting piece, and then think about a significant piece of new construction, 3 stories in this case, being added across the front of the building there, and to tie into the existing building, both kind of where the entrance is now to the restaurant, where the main entrance is now, more or less, because that does line up with the corridor between the cafeteria and the gym. And we could build as much program space as would be needed, depending on which enrollment is ultimately accepted. And as part of that construction, maybe we build a couple of high bay shops, which would give us the swing space to renovate some of the other shops during the school year, because our experience tells us that not all of this work obviously can happen during the summers when the shops might be unoccupied, and we need swing space for things like carpentry or metal fab or automotive, things that can't be put in modular classrooms and so forth. So that just one approach to the way of thinking about this. This would allow the septic field in front of the school to remain, probably be enhanced or upgraded, but at least the location of it could stay. And obviously it needs to stay to keep the existing school in operation too. So that's going to be a challenge in any kind of addition, renovation option. And what it also does, as we did in this project down in Connecticut, this was the existing building. We added a piece of new construction in front of that as well. Obviously, glassy, 21st century, it had a much more appropriate image for what they wanted. And by building in front of your existing school, you could do the same here if that were desired. Again, we're making some big assumptions here. But of course, another option is to think about all new construction. And we believe that there's a buildable area back here on the football field, track, baseball field in area. We know it's close to the wetlands and we'd have to deal with that. It's also kind of low in elevation. We have to think about that too. But there's enough area back there that we think you could fit a building on. And I apologize that that's kind of under that. But this is a 3-story building, 2 stories in parts, but on a compact footprint where you could get enough program probably to satisfy even the largest enrollment that you're considering. And then obviously, once that's built, you could demolish the existing school and replace it with the fields that would be needed and the parking and drop-off areas. Obviously, there'd be a couple of years there where you're out of athletic fields. You have to think about, making alternatives there. But for the most part, the school could remain, during the construction phase, still with the same circulation and service areas in front of and behind the school. And the only thing that's really disrupted by that kind of a strategy, as we say, are the athletic fields. And here's, what that footprint that we were drawing, the 3-story footprint. It does, similar to Cape Cod, you might say there's sort of career clusters. This might be the engineering and fabrication and construction, and again, classrooms might be across the corridor from it. On the upper levels, again, you could have some low bay shops with classrooms directly across and some shared collaboration areas and so forth. The building could be separated with kind of the public areas. On the right-hand side, the assembly areas of that auditorium and gym, and the student commons, cafeteria area in the center, and the academic areas on the left-hand side. Again, just one preliminary way of how a building might be organized. there. There's kind of the final site plan of it. Flip it around again, obviously Webster Street up here. It does have a good orientation for the compass of being kind of east-west, getting north and south orientation for the major academic areas, which is nice. And as we said, we think we could still work the septic field under this new football field, soccer field, track area there. That's certainly a major consideration in any option here as well. And then just from a site point of view, our landscape architect spoke to some of the possibilities here. These are all photos from Cape Cod Tech, except this center one here. Again, another good reason to go down there to see what's possible with schools these days, because we do want to make not just the building, but the entire site part of the curriculum. And where we have wetlands here, you can certainly envision science classes going out into the wetlands. And again, just to respond to the question about construction adjacent to occupancy, this is Springfield, the existing old Putnam Vocational School, which was built, the original building was built, I think, in the 20s, and then added on to like in the 70s. This is the new building built without disrupting the existing building. Even back here, these were the auto shops, and we still maintain a drivable entrance in and out of those shops during construction here. And at the closest point, this building was about 20 feet away from the existing building there. They did have the luxury of having frontage on a couple streets, though, so that the construction entrance could be safely segregated from the ongoing school. A different approach, though, addition renovation. This is Southeastern Vocational over in Easton. The only bit of new construction in this renovation addition was basically new gym and locker room. But what that allowed was kind of a domino effect of converting the existing gym into a library. Although first it was swing classrooms, temporary classrooms were built in the old gym. And then the old library space could be the expansion of the cafeteria. But then all of the shop areas and classroom areas, which all got renovated, needed to be renovated during summers and during the school year. And so the contractor employed double shifts during the summer to maximize how much they could get done during that time. And the building was basically segregated off into phases so that, this entire wing, for instance, might be turned over to the contractor, and all the circulation would go around the other side of the courtyard for the students during that time. And then an even more drastic addition renovation scenario was at Blue Hills up in Canton. The entire school was renovated, pretty large school, and they did it without any swing space at all by working second shift, meaning literally the kids would be in the space during the day, from whatever it is, 8 o'clock to 2:30 or 2:45. The contractor would come in at 3 o'clock and work till 11 o'clock at night. They'd have a crew that would clean up and return the space to be usable in the next morning. The same spaces that they were working in the evening would be used for school. And so you would end up with some things like this photograph where, they were working overhead in that corridor the night before, but they cleaned it up and the students could use it. And obviously at times there'd be two kind of systems, if they were upgrading the electrical, they had to make sure the existing electrical was maintained and new electrical was going in and in the same space. There were certainly challenges to that, but it expedited the schedule so that it impacted fewer students, because some of these renovation projects, take 3.5, 4 years, which for some students is their entire, high school experience. This was able to be done in a slightly shorter time by doing this. And as we said, it saved investing in a lot of portable classrooms for swing space. But there certainly were challenges. Again, another program you might want to contact to get their firsthand experience of how it was. And sustainability is important in all we do these days. And even in a vocational school, which is used around the clock and around the summer, we can still be very energy efficient and conscious of environmental impact. So We would weave that into the program. All of our schools are so-called green schools. Most of them certified by, for those who are familiar, the LEED, L-E-E-D certification, and not just certified, but at a higher level where you get more reimbursement from the state, which is a great, economic thing to keep in mind. And then just a standard question up at the designer selection panel with the MSBA is, how do you make these very complicated buildings, particularly the heating, ventilating, lighting systems, how do you make them kind of user-friendly and intuitive? And so our engineers spoke to how we select systems these days, and how we try to work with the facility staff and make the controls as intuitive and simple as possible, even though the buildings themselves might be fairly complicated. One of the things to note these days too is most of our projects these days are going all electric, no longer relying on fossil fuels, natural gas. That's a discussion we'll have with you. Some of them are thinking about net zero or being net zero ready. It's very hard to do in a vocational school, especially one that, as you say, has night classes or summer classes. It's relatively easy with an elementary school that operates, from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. They shut all the lights, they turn down the heat, they don't operate in summer. The amount of energy they use on an annual basis is, significantly less than what this building would use. But we can still be energy efficient in whatever choices we make, and our engineers will work with you on how we select systems these days. But a lot of them are they're the equivalent. You don't have one in here, but a split system that some of you may have in your house that it has a fancy name of variable refrigerant, VRF, variable refrigerant. But okay, we'll go through, and as they showed, they can save energy significantly over a sort of base building that just barely meets code. The other thing that we'll have as a challenge, keeping in mind, is the Massachusetts is adopting a new energy code, new part of the building code starting in July that we'll all have to meet, and buildings will get more and more efficient. The panel also asked us about our workload, and so we showed them what's happening, some of our other projects that I mentioned, but that we certainly have the availability to take this on as well. A couple of our major projects will be sort of tapering down, just as this one requires more effort and is ramping up. So we're happy to be here, and we asked our consultants likewise. They're selected to be on our team, and with the same kind of availability to serve you. So thanks I'm sorry that took as long as it did, but we appreciate that. And we're looking forward to this project. As we said, we love to have long-term relationships, not just, project by project. We learn a lot just by being involved in these kind of projects. Even for the little kinds of things, like we're looking at the culinary arts kitchen right now and the carpentry shop, being involved in those kind of projects, as well as these big, what might be all new school. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much,
Thanks.
Carl.
Okay.
So we move on to the next portion, which is the contract for DRA. We have, I don't know how much detail you're going to go into. I know we don't have too much time, so.
Is this that on your PDF?
Yes, you could, thank you. And for those of you in the room, on page 8 of your packet, there is table of contents for the contract that I'll kind of just take you through. There's a lot on here, but it's really only a small portion that either you haven't seen before, or isn't, MSBA boilerplate language. So I've highlighted pretty much the two things on the slide that is up on the screen right now. Attachment A and attachment A1 are really the only two things that we really we really want you to dig into at all. So the first on meeting packet, page 9, these are just the first couple of pages of the contract, and it lays out just which firms that DRA will have working under them as consultants. So those are all fantastic. Those are all firms that we've worked with before. Attachment A is the payment schedule. So as you'll see, sorry, this is you can keep it on that first. Oh, no, sorry. No, I think you're actually good. Sorry, you were right. You were right. You can go back, yeah. Okay. So attachment A is the payment schedule. And as you can see here, their total fee for the project for basic services is $1 million even. This was $100,000 less than what we had budgeted for that amount. So because of DRA's familiarity with the project, they felt that they could jump right in. It won't take as long as it would have taken if we had hired a different one of the others. So that was fantastic from a budget standpoint. So as you can see up on the screen, $1 million. Thank you. And then we have $300,000 in reimbursables, reimbursable allowances. If you flip to page 13 of your packet, you can see that the basic services, they've shown what's included in that $1 million. And then they provided a budget for the extra services, the reimbursables, which are, you can see here, site surveying, environmental permitting, geoenvironmental, all of these items that total $300,000. That was in line exactly with what we had budgeted previously. So we did go through this with DRA. We did have Ruth review this on our team thoroughly, and we feel that not only is this reasonable and fair, it covers everything we need it to. And like I said, the reimbursable, the extra services allowance here, we'll be tracking that outside of this $1 million. But attachment A1, which is this schedule here, we're not going to get into all of this detail, but it does lay out the roles and responsibilities of us, the district, and DRA, and will help us. We'll be using this as a roadmap to move forward through feasibility and schematic design. So I did want to show that those are the most important parts of the contract. We've thoroughly vetted them, and you know, it does give us a lot to work with and stand on as a contract. We also, if you go back to the table of contents on page 8 of your packet, you'll see it also includes, the contract also includes, you know, the MSBA base contract, which is the standard language, the all of the items that were in the request for designer services, addenda that we issued with that RFS, MSBA module, module 3 and 4, so their guidelines. There's a lot that's included. There's 300 pages of contract, but hopefully you understand that I boiled it down to what the most important pieces are. So are there any questions on the contract?
Well, not so much on the contract, I just want to know how many of these proposals of the site and design you have to have for MSBA.
So
So
many options?
Yeah, how many options do you have to show them? How many do you have to propose to them?
we work with DRA to identify all of the possibilities. I think they require us to show like code upgrade only, renovation only, and all the way to a new building. So DRA will identify a few options that are anything from code upgrade only, and all the way to new building. So any ad reno, there might be a couple different ad reno options.
Does anybody else have any questions?
What are maybe the slide about other?
Oh, yes, actually, there's a chart on the slide that shows like a bar chart. I can't remember.
Feasibility study one?
That,
Back,
thank you,
Right there.
Belinda, would you like to?
Just for those folks who don't deal with the designer contracts on an everyday basis, like we do, we pulled some examples of other schools, so you'll see the name of the school at the bottom, and where, the enrollment obviously varies quite a bit. Some of them have lower enrollments, down to 700, all the way up to 1,300 students. But the green line that runs through is the average. But just so you can see that it's this amount, this contract amount is not unreasonable in any sort of way in comparison to other schools. Obviously, you can never compare two schools completely. But just to show an average cost for a designer contract for these types of feasibility studies.
And if I could add, it does go all the way back to almost 10 years ago, these numbers, so, and doesn't necessarily include things that have happened since the pandemic, so, with that in mind, that green line probably does raise a little higher, these days, so,
Yeah.
right in line with, what we would expect.
Exactly, and again, this has nothing, no relation to actual construction costs, which of course, if construction costs were on this, that green line would be somewhere around the ceiling. But this is just related to the designer fees for the feasibility study, which is this initial period of time for about 2 years to study the process of the new building or renovation.
anyone else have any questions? Anybody out there in Never Never Land? Okay.
So we would be looking for a vote to approve that contract
Yeah,
today.
yeah. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract for designer services as presented by DRA. Motion by Bob Mahoney, second by Situate. Any discussion? Okay, I seeing none, I'll call the roll. Bob Haywood, yes. Tom Hickey,
Yes.
Mark Aubrey,
Yes.
Keith Pueno,
Yes.
George Cooney,
Yes. Yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
Yes.
Bob Mello,
Yes.
Bob Mola, Dan Salvucci. Hey, Dan.
I think he's asleep.
Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you. Jen, again, schedule update.
So if you do still have some time, I do have the
No,
schedule.
no,
It's,
we're good. We're good.
okay, so then, I'll go through it because it really hasn't changed much. Joke about one. Yes, here. So here is the schedule, on the left, forming the project team. We have completed that section. We are now in feasibility. And the next step, as we work with DRA, as DRA mentioned, we're already working on the educational visioning process. And we have those meetings thankfully already scheduled as we move into summer. So from there, we have the educational visioning, and we're working with Tom and his team to put together the educational plan, which you will all see as well. And that, along with initial looks at options, like we were just talking about, anything from code upgrade to new construction, that will go into the MSBA as a package. It's called the Preliminary Design Program. So the PDP, as we call it, and that is currently scheduled to be submitted in late September, early October. Gotta work with Carl to get that timeline and estimate. But so right now, that's what we're looking at for the first submission. From there, between that submission in, let's say, early October, through the end of December, we'll be working to kind of narrow down the options and kind of get a closer look at which option you all feel is the correct solution for your school. And at that point in December, we will submit that along with other studies and reports and things that we do from now until December. We'll submit a package that explains to MSBA this is the solution we've chosen, and this is why we want it, and why it's the only solution that makes sense for South Shore. And then 2 months later, the MSBA takes 2 months to review that package. They'll give us some initial comments back, and then 2 months later at their board of directors meetings, they will approve us to move forward with that, this single option into schematic design. So at that point, we'll be working to put much more detail into that single option. And by the end of that process, we're targeting to submit the schematic design in June of 2024, the end of June of 2024. Again, they'll take 2 months and give us some feedback. We'll have a couple of meetings with them. But at the end of that process, they will again approve the project in August of 2024. At that point, we'll have a budget, the budget for the project, and that is the budget we live within. We'll know exactly how much they're reimbursing us for, although our team will work as we go to make sure that you understand reimbursement process and what you would be looking at as based on what we're working with DRA on. So we should have an approval from the MSBA in August of 2024. And from there, we will need to get district approval and votes, and we're still, I think, still talking about whether we're going to each town meeting. I mean, either way, we should go presentations to town meeting, or if it's a district-wide ballot. There's still working on the timeline of that, just because the fall of 2024 is also the presidential election, so we want to make sure that we're reaching the widest audience possible, so that we actually,
Get a big vote of turnout.
So that is where the project schedule stands. Is there any on where we are, where we're going? All right, we'll keep you updated as we go. That is all I have.
Mr. Chair, so just to punctuate, our job this summer is to complete the visioning process. And will it be inviting parents to join some staff and students? But it's an exciting and aggressive timeline, and we're ready to get started.
Next meeting, Jen, is of us.
I think we're going to try to meet monthly after this, and then maybe we can work. I'll work with Tom and see if we can
So
schedule the
nothing's
next one.
scheduled yet.
Right.
Very
Hoping we can get it to like kind of a regular schedule of the X day of the month or something like that.
It might be, Mr. Chair, that we consider having a meeting like this just prior to a monthly school committee meeting.
Yeah.
That might be an option as well, routine.
Yeah.
We can revisit that.
We'll figure it out. All right.
Are several of your members school committee members? All of them, right? Yes. So
We're all on.
we've seen that before, that we do it back to back.
That'd be great.
All right, now, Dan's still muted and asleep. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Situate. Second, Rockland. Bob Hayward, yes. Tom Hickey.
Okay, yes.
Oh, darn. Mark Aubrey.
Yes.
Steve Doyle. George Cooney.
Yes.
Bob